I started sensing something was wrong one October afternoon, when the withered red maple leaves began covering the walkway in front of our two-story house on the outskirts of Nashville. After nearly 6 years of marriage, I had always thought my relationship was stable, not perfect, but at least peaceful. My wife, Emily, a senior employee at a major media company downtown, always came home on time and showed great affection whenever we were together. But lately, she seemed different. At first it was just small things, coming home late without notice, phone calls in the middle of the night, the way she avoided my eyes whenever I tried to ask questions. Then the frequency increased so rapidly that doubt started creeping into my mind. One weekend, I decided to check Emily's phone, which she had accidentally left on the dining table while she was showering. My heart nearly stopped when the screen kept flashing with messages from unknown numbers. Messages that no normal friend would send. I fought back the surge of anger, telling myself it could be a misunderstanding, but deep down, instinct was screaming that something real was happening. The next morning, I went to visit an old friend of mine, Lucas, who is now a lawyer. After listening carefully to my suspicions, he thought for a moment and said, "Jacob, I know you want answers immediately, but I strongly advise you not to act rashly. You need evidence, and it must be strong enough that she can't deny it when we move forward. If you confront her too early, she'll deny everything, and things will only get worse." Following Lucas's advice, I discreetly ordered a few compact surveillance cameras online, ones small enough to hide easily around the house. I installed them on a morning when Emily had already left for work. Each time I set up a device, my hands trembled from a mix of guilt and fury. The first week went by without anything unusual, except for a few nights where Emily spent a long time talking on the phone in the bedroom, thinking I was asleep. But by the second week, when I reviewed the footage on my laptop, a wave of revulsion hit me so hard I could barely breathe. Right inside the home I had worked so hard to build, the wife I had trusted with all my heart appeared with her boss, Mark, a man I had once welcomed warmly at end-of-year house parties. The images felt like icy daggers stabbing straight into my chest. I fought back the nausea rising in my throat, but it didn't end there. A few days later, I discovered footage of Emily with Alex, my longtime drinking buddy on weekends, engaged in the same sickening acts. It was a bitter realization. I had been betrayed by the very people I thought closest. I immediately called Lucas, my voice trembling. "I can't take this anymore, Lucas. You hear me? I have to do something now. How can I keep looking at her face every day and pretend I don't know?" Lucas sighed, his voice steady but full of understanding. "Jacob, stay calm. I know it's hard, but you need to endure a little longer. We must do this the right way. Trust me, if you act impulsively now, you'll lose everything. Stay silent, gather all the evidence, and when the time is right, we strike." The following days felt endless. I still woke up next to Emily each morning, still sat at the same dinner table with her. But every smile she gave now sent a cold shiver down my spine. I forced myself to act normal, to not tip her off, even as my insides felt like they were about to explode. Many nights, I lay stretched out on the living room couch, staring blankly at the ceiling, wondering why this was happening to me. I blamed myself for trusting too easily, for being so naive. Each morning I told myself, just endure a little longer. Just a little more, and it would all end. But every endurance has its limit, and I knew mine was dangerously close. I would not let myself be trampled like this forever. I would wait. But Emily's reckoning was coming, very soon. The following days dragged on like a never-ending nightmare. I, Jacob, 37 years old, once a man proud of my strength and logic, had been reduced to a hollow shell. By day, I put on a mask of calm to work at the auto garage in Franklin, Tennessee, fixing crumpled cars from collisions. By night, I returned to a cold, empty home. Every corner, filled with images of betrayal, I had to pretend not to see. The hardest part was having no one to talk to. Lucas had warned me, if you want to win, you must keep absolute silence. I knew he was right, but that also meant bearing the crushing weight of all these emotions alone. I missed my son, Caleb, terribly. He had just turned 8, living with his biological mother in Kansas City. He was supposed to spend the summer with me, like every year, but the pandemic shattered those plans. Our brief FaceTime calls could never fill the aching void. Some nights, I turned on my phone just to look at my wallpaper. A picture of Caleb grinning widely, with 2 front teeth still growing in. Loneliness clawed at me like a trapped beast. Most of my close friends, people I knew through Emily, were no longer trustworthy. The knowledge that some of them had laughed with me every weekend, only to help cover up my wife's betrayal, made my stomach twist every time I thought about it. My body began to break down as well. I lost nearly 18 pounds in just over a month. My clothes hung loosely, my face became gaunt, my eyes were constantly bloodshot from lack of sleep. Each morning, I stared into the mirror, seeing a stranger staring back. A shattered, exhausted version of myself I barely recognized. Insomnia was the worst. I often lay awake on the living room couch, eyes wide open in the darkness, replaying the videos I had recorded. The stolen hugs, the sly smiles, the whispered secrets. I wished I could stop remembering them, but every time I closed my eyes they flooded back. Vivid and merciless, as if someone was clawing at my mind from the inside. Some nights, I drove aimlessly for hours just to keep from going insane. I wandered the quiet suburban streets, the dim streetlights stretching across rain-slicked roads, listening to the wind whistling through a cracked window, wondering where I had gone wrong. I had loved, tried, and trusted Emily completely. So why did it end like this? Mild depression clung to me like a thick, black shroud. Simple tasks, washing dishes, cleaning the house, even changing into a fresh shirt, felt crushing. One evening, I sat for almost 3 hours on my front porch, just watching people walk by, feeling like a ghost, adrift among the living. One Friday night, as I walked into the garage after hours, my coworker Ethan, a rugged mechanic in his 40s, patted me on the back and said, "Jacob, you all right, man? You look like you just fought a pack of wolves." I forced a weak smile. Probably just the lack of sleep. Ethan squinted at me, studying my face like he wanted to say more, but in the end he just nodded and stepped back. I knew I wasn't hiding it well anymore. The pain was eating away at me day by day, and soon, if I didn't find a way out, it would consume me completely. That night, when I returned to the dark, empty house, I sat down at the dining table, staring at the empty chair across from me. The chair where Emily used to sit, laughing, weaving her sweet lies. I pulled the wedding ring from the drawer, turning it over and over in my palm. A perfect circle, symbolizing eternity, now nothing more than a bitter reminder of what was never real. I made a promise to myself. This time, I wouldn't break. This pain, this betrayal, it would become my strength. I would wait a little longer, patient like a hunter stalking prey, waiting for her to walk straight into the trap. And when that day came, I would end it all. Swift, clean, and without regret. The house was silent, only the slow ticking of the wall clock filling the air. I closed my eyes, took a deep breath. The game had only just begun. And this time, I held every card in my hand. In the days that followed, I kept quietly gathering evidence, as patiently as a hunter waiting deep in the woods. I knew I couldn't act impulsively. Each time I opened my laptop to review footage from the hidden cameras, I felt like my heart was being crushed in a vise. I had seen enough to know this wasn't a one-time mistake. Over 2 months, I recorded at least 7 different occasions where Emily brought other men into our home. Not just Mark, her all-too-familiar boss, but Alex, my so-called best friend, and 2 strangers I had never seen before. They showed no hesitation, no shame. Right there, on the very sofa where I used to read bedtime stories to Caleb. Right there at the dining table where we once celebrated birthdays together as a family. Even in the bathroom, their laughter echoing against the walls that once held so many precious memories. I thought I had prepared myself mentally. I hadn't. No one is ever truly ready to see their home torn apart so brutally. One night, while reviewing footage, I stumbled upon something that made my blood run cold. During a video call with Caleb, I overheard Emily's voice in the background. "Hurry up and hang up, I'm sick of listening to that kid yammering." I froze in my seat. Emily hadn't just betrayed me. She'd despised the innocent boy I loved more than life itself. Rage flared within me like a wildfire. But I forced myself to stay calm, meticulously documenting every detail, every timestamp. I knew, one day, all this would be the ammunition I needed to protect Caleb and myself. The next day, I decided to dig through Emily's old devices. Her old iPod still had synced data from her iPhone. I spent almost 3 hours combing through it, and when I uncovered the archived texts, the truth was even worse than I had imagined. Emily had been involved with Mark even before she and I got married. Worse yet, she had also been with Chris, a former co-worker I had trusted enough to hand over house keys when I traveled for work. Adding salt to the wound, texts between Emily and her best friend Amanda showed Amanda had helped cover up the affairs for years, making excuses for late nights, arranging weekend trips, so Emily could meet her lovers freely. I realized the world I once trusted had crumbled long ago. I had simply been too blind to see it. Every message, every photo, every recording was another knife carving deeper into my heart, reminding me there was no turning back. One recording still haunts me. Emily sneering as she talked to Mark about Caleb. "He's just like his dad, always clinging. It's exhausting. I wish he'd just stay with his mom and leave me alone." I turned off the device and sat motionless in the dark, a crushing heaviness settling over me. Caleb, my sweet, bright-eyed boy, had no idea the woman he once called stepmom harbored such hatred toward him. For a moment tears threatened, but the pain hardened into icy resolve. There would be no more softness left for Emily. I wasn't just fighting for myself anymore. I was fighting for Caleb, to protect him from the poison disguised as affection. The more I uncovered, the worse it got. Emily hadn't just cheated with 4 men. She had also met random guys through dating apps, sneaking around while I busted my back building a life for us. Some encounters happened just a night before our wedding anniversaries. I documented everything, every piece of evidence, every meeting, every name, leaving nothing out. And when the refrigerator door creaked open in the empty kitchen, I whispered to myself, "It's almost time, Jacob, just a little longer." I wouldn't blow up in a fit of rage like some reckless fool. I would move precisely, methodically, leaving no escape routes for anyone. The real game was just beginning. That day started like any other ordinary workday. Until everything collapsed like an avalanche. I was repairing an old Ford pickup at the garage when a sharp sheet of steel sliced deep into my calf. Blood gushed out immediately, soaking my jeans in seconds. Ethan, my closest friend left at the shop, rushed over, hastily bandaging the wound and driving me to the nearest ER. 35 stitches later, after 3 grueling hours battling the pain, I lay flat on a hospital bed, staring at the sterile white ceiling, trying to call Emily. One call, no answer. 5 minutes later, another call. Still nothing. I kept dialing a third, then a 4th time, texting her desperately, and waiting. Over an hour passed in dead silence. The physical pain was nothing compared to the agony of knowing the person you love had abandoned you at your worst. Finally, unable to bear it anymore, I called for an Uber to take me home. The car rolled slowly through the familiar streets, past rows of houses flickering under the dim streetlights. As we turned onto Willow Creek Drive, where my pale blue house sat quietly under the old maple trees, my heart clenched. There, under the porch light, stood Emily, wrapped in the arms of Mark, the same boss I had once welcomed warmly into my home countless times. And they weren't just hugging, they were kissing. A deep, hungry kiss, without a shred of hesitation. I asked the driver to stop at the end of the street, my hands trembling as I pulled out my phone. I snapped 3 or 4 photos in quick succession, each one carving another deep wound into my heart. "Keep going," I said hoarsely to the driver, my eyes never leaving the cheating couple locked in passion right in front of my house. The Uber rolled slowly past, leaving me slumped in the back seat, hollow and broken. The searing pain from my wounded leg was nothing compared to the devastation tearing through my soul at that moment. I didn't go home right away. Instead, I sat slumped in the break room at the shop, my head buried in my arms, ignoring the blood soaking through my makeshift bandage. I didn't cry. It felt like my tears had dried up long ago. Only an empty, frozen void remained inside me, as if someone had scraped away every last feeling. Near dawn, I finally dragged my exhausted body home. Emily was gone. The house was eerily silent, the ticking of the wall clock pounding against my soul like a relentless hammer. The next morning, I entered the study where I kept all the surveillance equipment and evidence. I opened my laptop and carefully stored everything onto 3 separate hard drives: photos, videos, texts, emails. Everything she couldn't deny. I knew our 6-year wedding anniversary was coming up. Every year, we had celebrated it with a romantic evening, whispering sweet promises to each other. But this year, I would turn that day into one Emily would never forget, a permanent scar marking the shame she brought upon herself. Quietly, I rented a small storage unit near downtown and began moving her belongings into it bit by bit whenever Emily was away. I also secretly contacted a top family law firm in Franklin, meeting privately with an attorney to prepare the divorce papers. Lucas, my old friend, remained my silent anchor during those dark days. "Jacob," he said, placing a firm hand on my shoulder, "you've come too far to turn back. End this the smartest way you can." I nodded. I wasn't the trembling, desperate man I had been that night anymore. I had turned my pain into fuel for resolve. And I was ready. I chose our anniversary as the day. A special gift for Emily, a gift she couldn't return, couldn't refuse, and could never erase. In the days leading up, I treated Emily as if nothing had happened. Still bought her flowers, still smiled, still listened to her shameless lies like a patient spectator watching a bad play. Behind that mask, however, a perfect plan was taking shape. Every detail meticulously arranged, every move calculated with surgical precision. The day she lost everything was just a few breaths away. And this time, no pity would hold me back. Not because I hated Emily, but because I needed to save myself. On the morning of our anniversary, I woke up earlier than usual. The sky was barely light, faint rays of sun filtering through the curtains. I brewed a cup of strong black coffee, sipping the bitter liquid slowly as if preparing for the long day ahead. First step, change the locks. I had scheduled a locksmith beforehand, a middle-aged man in a Navy uniform who quickly replaced every lock with swift efficiency. In less than an hour, a completely new security system was in place, and the only person with the key was me. Immediately after, I began packing up Emily's belongings. Each dress, each pair of shoes, each piece of makeup, carefully placed into large bags and neatly stacked into pre-labeled moving boxes. No music played, no words were spoken, only the soft rustle of wrapping paper and the creak of the cartwheels across the hardwood floor. My friend Ethan and 2 other co-workers helped silently. No one said a word all morning. We all understood. This wasn't just moving furniture. It was closing a chapter. We loaded everything into a pickup truck and drove it to the rented storage unit about 20 minutes from my house. I signed a 6-month lease and left the key and address in a small envelope. The final gift for Emily. That afternoon, I stopped by my usual flower shop. I picked out a bouquet of white roses, symbolizing a peaceful end, and the most expensive box of handcrafted chocolates they had. No one at the shop could have guessed what the calm man in the gray shirt was preparing for. Even I felt like an actor in a film, one playing the role of a composed, cold-hearted lead. Around 1 p.m., I drove to the building where Emily worked. The parking lot was packed, bustling with office workers coming and going. I walked into the lobby, carrying the flowers and chocolates, forcing a natural smile onto my face. The receptionist smiled warmly. "Good afternoon. How can I help you?" "I'm here to see Emily Carter," I said with a warm voice. "I have an anniversary gift to deliver personally." The receptionist, suspecting nothing, made a quick call upstairs. Within minutes, Emily appeared at the end of the hallway, dressed elegantly in a cream-colored business dress, her face lighting up with delight as if the whole world was still intact. "Jacob," she gasped, covering her mouth with one hand, visibly touched. "You came." I stepped forward, offering the flowers and chocolates. "Happy 6-year anniversary, huh?" I whispered, and before the stunned eyes of her co-workers, I gently kissed her cheek. Emily blushed deeply, her eyes sparkling as if I was still the man she had once sworn to love.
Amazing, she whispered. I smiled and glanced at my watch. I have a wound checkup at 2 o'clock, but tonight, don't make any plans. I have a big surprise for you. Emily beamed, completely oblivious that the surprise would change her life forever. I turned and walked away from the building, each step feeling like treading across a frozen lake. Fragile, cold, but steady.
At exactly 2 p.m., the familiar black-white police cruiser pulled up quietly outside Emily's office building.
2 deputies stepped out, holding a thick envelope sealed with a bold red stamp. Within minutes, the whole office buzzed with whispers. Emily, pale as a ghost, stood frozen in the lobby, her hands trembling as she accepted the documents. An official divorce filing, complete with an eviction order and non-negotiable terms. Some employees gathered around, murmuring, their curious stares like invisible knives cutting into Emily.
I watched from across the parking lot, feeling calmer than I had in months.
At that moment, I didn't feel victorious. I only felt part of me had died long ago, along with the naive hopes and promises. When Emily collapsed onto a chair, covering her face and sobbing, I simply turned and walked away, leaving behind everything that used to be called the past. A new chapter was waiting for me, and this time I would write it with my own hands.
Around 7 in the evening, Emily arrived at the house, just as I had instructed in the message earlier. Her car pulled up by the curb, headlights casting a harsh glow across the cold, empty front of the house. I waited silently in the darkness behind the door, listening to the sharp, hurried clicks of her heels on the brick walkway. When the door burst open, Emily stormed in like a whirlwind. "Jacob," she choked out, her eyes red and swollen, mascara streaking down her cheeks in black smudges. "What the hell are you doing? How could you humiliate me like that in front of everyone?" I stayed calm, pointing to the 2 neatly packed boxes by the door. "Your stuff is right here. This is the storage unit key, and this is my attorney's contact card." Emily rushed over, grabbing my arm, sobbing. "No, Jacob, we can talk about this. I know I messed up, I was so stupid, but please, don't end it like this." I gently pried her hands off me, my voice even. "There's nothing left to say, Emily." Her eyes flashed from pleading to desperate. Then, like a shadow of herself, Emily screamed. "And what about you? You think you're perfect? You were always so cold. You never cared how I felt." I let out a dry, bitter laugh. "Oh, I got cold after you warmed yourself up with half the town, Emily." Those words hit her like a slap across whatever pride she had left. Emily lunged at me, pounding her fists weakly against my chest, tears streaming down her face. "You don't understand. I was lonely. You abandoned me. I just wanted to feel loved." I didn't respond, only stepped back to keep my distance. Outside, 2 deputies stood silently by their patrol car, watching from afar, ready to step in if things escalated. In her frenzy, Emily suddenly swung and slapped me hard across the face. The sharp crack echoed through the night air, and both deputies immediately approached. I raised my hand, signaling that I didn't want to press charges. "It's okay," I said hoarsely. "I'm not filing anything against her." Still, following procedure, they filed an incident report, just in case I needed a restraining order later. Realizing she had crossed a line, Emily collapsed onto the brick steps, sobbing uncontrollably. I stood there, unmoved, watching her fall apart. That night, after the police ordered her to leave, I locked the door behind her. The house was so silent I could hear the wind slipping through the cracks in the windows. I sank into the couch, pulled out my phone and began typing. One by one, the messages went to those I once trusted, People who had watched everything unfold and said nothing. To Amanda, "We're finished. Take care." To Chris, "I hope you and Mark have a lot to share. Don't ever reach out again." To the group, "Appreciate the silence. Lesson received. Farewell." Each send felt like slicing through another tie binding me to a decaying past. No more justifications. No more pretending. It was time to wipe the slate clean. Soon after, my phone lit up. Calls and messages from Emily, Amanda, even Mark. I didn't open them. He didn't respond. Should shut the phone off without a second thought. A hollow stillness settled in. Sharp, but oddly liberating. I knew the road forward would be rough. But tonight, I finally began walking out of the prison I'd lived in for far too long. On the side table next to the sofa, the bouquet of white roses and unopened box of chocolates still sat. I picked up the flowers and walked out to the backyard. Under the faint moonlight, I released the bouquet into the small stream that cut across the garden. It floated away slowly, gently, like a farewell to everything that had died inside me that night. And I swore to myself, from this moment on, I would never again let anyone steal my peace. Finally, the appointment at the attorney's office came. I arrived 15 minutes early, dressed neatly in a dark shirt and simple slacks. Outside, a light rain fell, the droplets blurring against the glass windows like smeared memories I was about to close forever. Emily arrived a little later. She looked different from the furious encounters we had before. Hollow face, dark circles under her eyes, and a downcast gaze avoiding mine. My attorney, Mr. Harris, a sharp, quick-witted man in his 50s, waved us into the conference room. The settlement papers were already laid out on the table. I skimmed through one last time before signing. I would keep the house on Willow Creek, all of my hard-earned retirement funds, and every asset under my name. Emily would receive $73,000 from our joint savings, a price I gladly paid for my complete freedom from her. No spousal support, no compensation, no future contact unless through attorneys. The room was so silent I could hear every page turn and the soft tapping of rain against the windows. I signed my name first, each stroke firm and decisive, as if severing the final chain. When I handed the papers to Emily, her hand trembled slightly, but she eventually took the pen. She sat there for a moment, staring into the void. I didn't know what she was thinking, and honestly, I no longer cared. At last, Emily signed. Her signature was shaky, ink smudged in a few places, as if her hand could barely hold steady. Both attorneys confirmed the documents, stamped them, and began gathering the files. Mr. Harris turned to me with a small nod. "Congratulations, Jacob. Everything will be finalized in about 2 months." I simply responded with a slight nod. No emotion. No satisfaction. Just pure emptiness. As I left the conference room, Emily tried to speak. "Jacob," she mumbled, her voice hoarse. Could we just talk, even if it's just for me to apologize?" I stopped, looked her straight in the eyes one last time. "No need, Emily. Sometimes silence is the clearest answer." Without another word, I turned and walked away. The sky over Franklin that day was still drizzling, not heavy, but enough to cast a hazy film over the streets. I walked through the rain, feeling each cold drop sink into my skin, as if washing away the dust of the days I was leaving behind. Back home, I changed out of my wet clothes, poured myself a glass of whiskey, and sat down in the old armchair in the living room. The house now felt empty but peaceful, completely different from the suffocating air when Emily still lived there. No more fake laughter, no more secretive phone calls whispered behind closed doors, no more averted glances whenever I entered the room. Only me, and the peace I had fought through pain to reclaim. I opened my laptop, logged into the joint bank account, and confirmed that the $73,000 had been transferred to Emily's personal account as agreed. Then I requested the closure of all remaining shared accounts, ending every last financial tie between us. My phone buzzed. A message from an unknown number. But I didn't need to read it to know who it was. I pressed and held, then tapped block without hesitation. Just a few simple taps, but it felt like lifting a heavy boulder off my chest after months of carrying it. I knew rebuilding myself wouldn't happen overnight. The wounds would still bleed, and old memories would come back to haunt me on rainy nights. But the difference was, this time, I wouldn't fall. I would rebuild my life from the shattered pieces. No pity needed. No rescue necessary. Just me, Jacob, with enough courage to move forward. I leaned back, closed my eyes, and listened to the steady sound of rain tapping against the porch. An old song drifted from the forgotten radio on the shelf, a slow, hopeful melody. A new chapter had begun, and this time, I would be the one holding the pen. I thought everything had ended, that the wounds were already too deep to be cut any further. But fate wasn't done with me yet. 1 week after signing the divorce agreement, I got a call from my lawyer, Mr. Harris. "Jacob," he said, his voice heavier than usual, "it seems Emily wants to send you one final explanation. If you're willing, I can forward the message she asked me to deliver." I stayed silent for a moment. Part of me wanted to discard everything connected to Emily forever. But another part of me needed to know the full truth, no matter how cruel it was. "Send it," I replied curtly. A few minutes later, an email from Harris arrived. Her entire infrastructure, I opened it. Only a few lines, but each word was like a cold blade stabbing straight into my heart. "Jacob, I don't expect you to forgive me, but I think you have the right to know. 2 years ago, I had an abortion. I wasn't sure if the baby was yours or Mark's. I'm sorry. I truly am." I sat frozen in front of the screen. The air around me seemed to thicken, each breath heavier than the last. 2 years ago. Back then we were still trying to have a baby. I clearly remembered those nights when Emily curled up in my arms, whispering, "I want to have a child with you, Jacob." I had believed in that sparkling gaze, believed in that tender smile, believed in the dream of becoming a father again. Meanwhile, as I clung to that hope, Emily had quietly destroyed it, and didn't even know whose child it was. I didn't know how long I sat there, unmoving. Only when my fists clenched so tightly that my knuckles turned white did I realize I was trembling. A hollow feeling spread inside me, as if someone had scooped out my heart, leaving behind a cold, bottomless void. That entire night, I wandered aimlessly through Franklin's empty streets, the streetlights blurring in the thin rain. Old memories flooded back like broken film reels. The day I proposed by Crystal Lake. The day we signed the papers for our first house. The long hours I spent fixing every floor tile, just to make Emily smile. It was all a clever scam. I wasn't the one she chose out of love. I was just the safe choice when the men she truly wanted wouldn't commit. A backup plan. An insurance policy. A life raft in a sea of calculations. The deepest pain wasn't the betrayal. It was realizing I had never been the real choice from the start. At some point, I sat down on a park bench near the town square, soaked to the bone, head bowed. A bitter, freezing wind blew through, numbing my skin. But the cold inside was 100 times worse. Hurried up the final steps. I thought of Caleb, the only person I still loved unconditionally. I reminded myself, no matter what else crumbled, I still had my son. Caleb deserved a strong father, not a man crushed by grief. Near midnight, I returned home. I stripped off the wet clothes, dried myself off, and stood before the mirror. The man looking back at me had cold, hollow eyes, but somewhere deep within them there was still a faint glimmer of light. The strength of a survivor. I opened the desk drawer and pulled out an old photo. Our wedding day picture. In the photo, I smiled brightly. She smiled too, but now all I could see was the lie behind it. Without hesitation, I tore the photo into tiny shreds and dropped them into the fireplace. The flames flared up, devouring the painful memories as if purging my soul. Standing there, watching the fire flicker, I silently vowed, "This is the last time you'll ever hurt me, Emily. From today on, I will live for myself." Outside, the rain had stopped. Faint stars began to appear through the thinning clouds. A new chapter in my life was beginning. No more lies. No more illusions. Only truth and the strength to move forward. 2 weeks after receiving Emily's final message, I decided it was time to change something in my life. One Saturday morning, I drove to the Animal Rescue Center on the outskirts of Franklin. I didn't have a clear plan, only that the big, empty house felt too hollow now, and I needed a small life to fill it. When I stepped into the main building, the sound of barking echoed off the concrete halls. A young staff member named Claire gave me a tour through the kennels. I nearly passed by every dog, until my eyes landed on a tiny creature curled up in the corner of a cage. A light brown chihuahua, barely the size of two cupped hands, stared at me with wide, dark eyes, full of fear and curiosity. Her temporary name's Cupcake, Claire smiled. Palm-year-old, abandoned near the market 2 months ago. She's shy but really affectionate. I knelt down, reaching a hand through the bars. The little dog sniffed my hand for a long moment. Then, suddenly, pressed her tiny head against my palm in a fragile gesture of trust. My heart clenched. No need to see any others, I whispered to Claire. I want her. A few quick papers were signed. I carried the tiny soul out to my truck, feeling for the first time in months that something warm was sparking inside me. I gave her a new name, Dulce, because her eyes were as sweet as candy melting in sunlight. Dulce quickly became the bright spot in my lonely days. Every morning she trotted after me into the garden. Every evening, she curled up in my lap as I read or watched the news. Dulce didn't judge, didn't ask questions, didn't betray. She simply existed, offering pure loyalty I had forgotten how to believe in. But even with Dulce, I knew I couldn't heal myself completely. So I started therapy. I found Dr. Morgan, a renowned therapist in Nashville known for helping veterans recover from trauma. The first session I barely spoke at all. I sat in silence for 45 minutes, occasionally clenching my fists on my knees. But Morgan didn't push. She just sat there, patient and steady, like a lighthouse standing firm in a sea of fog. By the third session, I started to talk. About Emily, about Caleb, about the deep disappointment and betrayal that had eaten away at me from the inside. Each time I spoke, it felt like pulling shards of glass out of my heart. Painful but necessary. And one evening, after finishing a session, Morgan said, "Jacob, it's time you think about the relationships you've cut off, not to go back to the past, but to give yourself a chance to close it properly." I knew she was talking about Sophia, my sister. We had once been very close, until my first divorce shattered the family. Misunderstandings and angry words had built a wall of silence that lasted nearly 8 years. That night, I sat at the kitchen table, Dulce resting her head on my leg, and typed the first message in all those years. "Sophia, if you still want to talk, I'm ready to listen." Just a few minutes later, my phone buzzed. "I've been waiting for this call, little brother. Let's meet." I laughed, a real laugh, the first in a very long time. We agreed to meet at a small cafe near Silver Creek Lake, the same place where our childhood picnics had been filled with laughter. When I walked in, Sophia was already there, her brown hair now dusted with silver, her sharp and warm eyes just the same as I remembered. There was no awkwardness, no blame. Just two blood relatives sitting down to start a new chapter together. We talked about Mom, about Dad, about Caleb, and about everything that had passed. Not to reopen old wounds, but to lay them to rest for good. That night, as I drove home with Dulce curled warmly on my lap, I realized something simple, yet profound. I had lost a lot, but I still had so much left, and what I had now was the true beginning of my real life. That day arrived more quietly than I had imagined, a full year since my divorce was finalized. That morning I still went to the garage as usual, wearing an old t-shirt, my hands covered in grease, finishing up a busted SUV for a regular customer. If Ethan hadn't lightly tapped my shoulder and said, "Pound year ago today you freed yourself from hell, Jacob," I might have completely forgotten. I just chuckled, shook my head and dove back into work. The emotions weren't intense anymore. No pain, no anger, no regret. Just an old milestone, like a mile marker long, left behind. Around 10 a.m., Lily, the receptionist at the garage, called me up to the office.
On the desk sat a neatly wrapped box of cookies with a small card. I raised an eyebrow. Who sent this? I asked. Billy shrugged. Not sure. The delivery guy just said it was for Jacob Harper. I opened the card and the familiar handwriting struck my eyes. Happy New Year to you. Wishing you happiness. Emily. I stared at the box for a long moment, then closed the card and set both down on the table. Whoever wants it can have it, I told Lily casually. I don't need it. No anger, no sad, just complete indifference. Cookies were still just cookies, and the memories behind them no longer held any weight for me. I went back to the garage, got on with my work, and didn't spare another thought for it. After work, I planned to head straight home, reward myself with a simple dinner, and sit on the back porch with Dulcie, gazing at the stars. But when I opened the garage door, I saw Ethan's red pickup parked proudly out front, along with a few other familiar cars. Stepping into the yard, I almost laughed. Under strings of lights hung along the fence, my friends, Ethan, Claire, old mechanic Bill, and even Sophia, stood there, each holding a beer or a glass, with a barbecue feast spread out in the middle of the yard. Dulce ran up to greet me, tongue lolling out in excitement. Welcome home, survivor, Ethan shouted, raising his beer high. As I burst out laughing, a warm feeling spreading through my chest. Sophia came over and hugged me lightly. You've come a long way, Jacob. I'm proud of you. I gripped her shoulder tightly, too choked up to say anything. That night, we ate, laughed, and shared stories, both old memories and new dreams. No one mentioned Emily. No one dug up the past. Only pure, unburdened joy, as if everyone agreed I had truly stepped into a new chapter. As night fell, I sat by the small fire pit, Dulce nestled in my lap, her eyes half closed in contentment. Ethan handed me a cold beer, patting my shoulder. So, he grinned. What's the plan for next year, Jacob? I stared into the dancing flames, thought for a moment, then said, I'm going to rebuild everything, little by little, but this time, my way. Ethan nodded, his eyes full of respect, and I knew I meant it. I would start over. No rushing, no fear. Maybe I'd take a small business course and open my own shop instead of working for others. Hmm. Hmm. Maybe I'd bring Caleb to stay with me longer during school breaks, making up for lost time. Maybe, just maybe, I'd allow my heart another chance if the time was right. But no matter what, I would walk forward on my own 2 feet, no longer chained to the ghosts of the past. Jacob's story is a testament to the power of resilience after heartbreak. Despite betrayal, loss, and deep loneliness, he chose not to fall, but to rebuild his life from the ruins. Through reconnecting with family, adopting Dulce, and healing through relentless effort, Jacob proves that even the deepest wounds can form the foundation of a stronger life. We can't choose our past, but we can always choose how we move forward. What do you think about Jacob's journey through pain and healing? Share your thoughts in the comments. And don't forget to follow the channel for more touching and inspiring stories about life and family.